a 4mm titanium shock tower, a CRCU hinge pin holder. Will be printed in a flex material TPU holder. With this newer one, it makes for a much slimmer tower and a sort of wide cutout right here. The M2C is a lot sturdier than my own star plates. Hello and welcome. Spring has already come to Sweden, but it's still a bit cold outside where I am, so I'm just out here in the workshop checking this Kraton out and having myself a cup of nice strong coffee. So this is Kraton number 3 on the workbench this time. Basically a Kraton EXB. Now this one is a little bit extra dear to me since I got this as a birthday present from my family. This was late August 2020, and I know my son really had to hunt for one. They were hard to get at the time, especially here in Sweden. I had read about a bunch about this one when it was announced, but I actually decided not to get one since I already have a couple of Kratons. So getting this one as a present was really nice and actually a bit unexpected. My kids think I have too many RCs already. The unboxing was like, wow, what a car, and I just needed to add electronics, but the next few weeks actually proved to be a bit challenging to me, mostly due to these new Lsd Diffs that I really knew nothing about. I will get back to that in a bit. First, a little rundown of this rig, starting from the front. And for the front, we have the stock Arrma 4mm shocks, we have the stock EXB arms, we have an RPM bumper, we have a CRCU hinge pin holder, and this front one also acts as a little bumper slash hinge pin stopper. No little Typhon tolling bumper needed when fitting this or using this together with an RPM bumper. So that's nice. And here we have a 4mm titanium shock tower. I drew this up initially for some stock looking V3 ones, but my son had a piece of titanium and he had this laser cut. There's really nothing wrong with the stock ones. They feel nice and solid and all, but I wanted to try titanium ones out, and I really love that material. Rest of the front end, it's all stock except for a CRCU Ackerman steering plate. For the rear, we have the stock Arrma 4mm shocks, we have the stock EXB arms, and we have some homemade mud guards, cut out some 2mm cutting boards. For the wing mount, this is just a slightly used twisted stock one that I reinforced with. I did a mod to it that I saw in a Facebook group. Basically, just some cut pieces from an RPM wing mount. It feels really nice and sturdy, but perhaps a bit too much. So I will try this one out instead. Now, this is a design made by a guy named Bendik Sorensen, known as IP&D on Thingiverse. I really like this design, but I took the liberty of adding the front pieces to my print. It's the whole thing is just PETG for now, but will be printed in a flex material TPU. But I will probably keep the front pieces in PETG. And the rest in the rear, this is just my usual T-bone style little basher bumper. And here we have the 4mm titanium tower. And I really like that they redesigned the rear tower on the EXB. They kind of changed the geometry of the rear with this new tower, and the new arms have the shock mount, so to speak, the lower shock mount a bit further in than the previous models and the RPM ones. I really like this new slim tower. It's really nicely done. If we compare the old tower, the V4 and older, with this newer one, it makes for a much slimmer tower, and I really like that. It's nicely done by Arrma. So to use the new arms on the V4 and older without modding, you have to swap to this newer EXB tower. To fit the older arms on this EXB without modding anything, well, just fit the old tower. Arrma do offer another 75 tower as well that looks like the older one, as a sort of EXB upgrade to the V4, or a 75 upgrade to the V4. I don't really see a purpose to that mix and match anymore. The V5s use the EXB style arms as well, and the EXB style rear tower. And I believe most people will just use the EXB arm from now on. I guess we don't know yet if RPM decides to upgrade theirs. We'll see. For the drivetrain and the middle, we have the stock 3mm chassis. We have the drive line also stock, and I'm running an open rear diff with 20k CST, center diff with full Lsd configuration and 150k CST, and for the front have a minimum Lsd configuration and a 50k CST fluid. For the electronics, this is a JX servo. It's a HV7032MG, and for the radio, I'm using the FlySky Noble NB4. It's a really nice radio in my opinion, and a really solid one. I just love it. For the ESC, it's a Hobbywing Max 6, and the motor is a Leopard Hobby V2, and it's a 4275 2000 kV, and I fitted a 16-tooth pinion to it. Now the Max 6 is a bit bulky in a truck like this, but feels really trustworthy in my opinion. And for the motor, this was the first time actually trying out this Leopard motor, and I'm extremely pleased how it runs. But we'll probably try some other motor later on this summer just to compare. So now I guess it's time for those little extra ramblings that I usually do, and I just need some more coffee first. So why an RPM bumper on an EXB? Well, the included bumper is a really nice design and all, basically consisting of 3 pieces. And while it's a nice design, in my opinion, it's made to take straight head-on collisions. During my first couple of jumps I was a bit clumsy and misjudged my landings. I landed on the front sort of, and it hit the ground on top of the bumper, and that resulted in a twisted chassis and a cracked diff housing. In my opinion, it's better to have the front bumper bolted straight through the chassis and into the diff housing. And well, I guess you could take the stock EXB one and drill some holes right here, but the plastic is kind of thin in those spots. I've been running RPM bumpers on several of my Arrmas, and that has saved those a lot of times, and I actually prefer this one over the stock one on the EXB as well. The RPM bumper is kind of an old design by now, and with the introduction of the V5, it doesn't really fit well anymore. It has to be modded, and it will be interesting to see if RPM makes another one or a revised one. The reason why it doesn't fit properly is basically because the hump on the V5 chassis It's extra wide. The diff hump right there that you see on the bottom. Now, I guess Arrma did account for that when they made this EXB bumper, since they have a sort of wide cutout right here. And that's not needed for the EXB since that chassis is flat underneath. So after twisting the chassis, I kind of considering changing it out to an M2C chassis that I had laying around. And now the M2C is a lot sturdier, and it does feel a lot more rigid than the EXB chassis. But it's not a really fair comparison though, since the M2C is 4 millimeters thick and the EXB one is 3 millimeter thick. Now this is the early M2C chassis where the droop ears are a bit too big to fit without modding the arms or the chassis. Now this has been revised by M2C, and the rear ears are smaller on the new ones. But at the time I didn't want to do any modding to either the arms or the chassis, so I decided to straighten the stock chassis instead. Basically to see if it could be done without weakening it. 75 T6 can crack when straightened. Well, I succeeded pretty well, and the chassis basically came out nice and straight after about an hour in the vise. I also made some other mods and upgrades, like these quality CRCU hinge pin holders right here, and the front one I was able to fit since I added the RPM bumper instead of the stock one. I also had to retighten the braces kind of frequently due to flex, I guess. Sure, I could have just added tougher Loctite, but I modded the braces to accept some nylock knots on top instead. And also at the front one, it's kind of hard to see right there, but it has a bolt that goes straight through and has a nylock in the bottom. And for the rear, I also added a titanium skid plate to basically stiffen up the rear. And so far so good. So it was kind of nice to reuse the chassis. It's nice and light and all, but maybe Arrma could have made it in a 4 millimeter thickness. It would be a bit more durable that way, in my opinion. So for the Lsd Diffs, now I'm all familiar with the limited slip diff and how that works from my doings with 1-to-1 cars, and it's kind of the same thinking with these RC diffs, but still different, mostly due to size, I guess. My EXB was the so-called first shipment, and it came out of the box with an Lsd front and center, but open diff in the rear. The box contained a note on the outside, and which said, "Please check your rear diff before you run it." The note basically said, check if there's enough shims, otherwise request those and add them. I did check my diff, and it did contain the right amount of shims, but the shims seemed to be of a lesser quality, and the diff wasn't really properly shimmed. Now, I read about problems with the rear diff before I even ran mine. People complained about this, and Arrma responded rather quickly, and their solution was to add Lsd plates to the rear as well. Now, that seemed like a really nice solution, but the problem was at the time there weren't any Lsd plates available anywhere. Now, I ran mine just one time, and although I didn't completely ruin the diff, I managed to damage the sun gears. So I was thinking, what now? There were no internal gear kits available either, and I had an RC event where I wanted to bring my EXB. Now, since there were no parts available, I fitted a V4 diff instead to the rear, but due to using an Lsd diff in the center, I read that people started to ruin the crown gears and input gears on those older ones, Well, mine actually worked nicely for that bash, but I wanted to fix and use my included EXB diff for the stronger and beefier crown and input. The problem was with that was that the Arrma had changed out the whole thing, so not a single part or shim from my regular Arrma diff assortment box would fit. Now, it really bothered me that the Lsd plates, especially star ones, weren't available. I saw that people using 12 by 18 shims to give that sun gear some support, and basically making it flat on top like the old ones were. And I saw some other ones though using star plates only, and to me that seemed to be the best fix and solution, especially since the cup is made for star plates, which would then nicely support that sun gear. So I really wanted these star plates. So what I did was I actually made up my own star plates, or kind of just mimicking the inside of the cup. And I drew this up, and I had them cut from a thin spring material. And I bought a bunch of different 6mm shims and shimmed the diff up rather tight with those, together with the star plates, like an open diff. And that way it did fit really nice in there. So you might ask, why would I need an open diff in the rear? And to be honest, maybe it wouldn't matter for me if I run an open diff or a minimum configured Lsd diff in the rear. I'm not really a skilled driver or hardcore basher or anything, but I really wanted to run the car like Arrma intended it to be. And an open diff in the rear is supposed to be better for handling, and that's probably why they made it like that in the first place. At the same time, I was fixing it up after the crash. I needed a crown gear and an input gear, and there were none to be found anywhere still, but instead I found this rear complete open diff, and the ARA 311066, and that was basically all that was available at the time. And I was thinking, I better buy one before it's gone. Well, I got two sorts of surprises when checking it out. First of all, it was assembled, and there were no input gear included in the bag. That was very different from the earlier non-Lsd versions, where the diffs came as a kit with an included input gear. Also, the diff was rather pricey, so at first I actually thought they had made a mistake. I emailed Horizon and simply asked them, isn't there supposed to be an input gear included like it used to be with the older ones? I really need one. And they answered rather promptly, and they said, well, no. And even if we would like to help you out, it doesn't matter. Input gears are about a month away. Okay. So second surprise was that actually Arrma had included a fix or an upgrade already to the ones that were damaging their rear open diffs. It wasn't star plates like I had expected. Instead, they included this thick shim, and simple and nice solution, I guess, but kind of the same one that several users had already tried by adding those 12 by 18 shims. So I used the crown gear and stuck that in the front, and managed to file down the messed up tooth on the input gear and reuse that. I also shimmed up the center and front with some better quality shims, shimmed them tighter in stock, and I read a bunch about Facebook group posts and posts in the Arrma forum and stuff like that people made it different ways. And I guess the thing was to to shim it really tight in order not to damage the sun gears. And in the front, when I was all done and just tried it out, I didn't really like how the steering performed with a full Lsd configuration in the front. So I changed that to a minimum Lsd configuration, and that with minimum Lsd configuration I thought worked better for the steering in the front than the full one. Now, since then, for the rear, I've been actually pretty good with my homemade star plates, and I haven't actually broken a single gear in any of the diffs. Nowadays, the EXB models ships with an Lsd diff in the rear as well, and I believe they use a minimum configured Lsd diff right there. But I guess this thick shim is actually still Arrma's solution for those who wants to run an open diff. Well, that kind of concludes this one, and I still got one more workbench vid planned, and that would be the last Kraton vid. Please watch out for that one, and thanks for watching this one.